story actually.
Okay. Hi everybody, we're all set. And thank you very, very much for being here tonight. We're really excited, the students and the people that we're calling Steve's people.
The experts.
The experts, right. But he calls them Steve's people. We're really, really thrilled that you're here. Let me just tell you a little bit about the Washington Center to our guests. My name is Andrea Barron, and I'm a Senior Program Manager for Civic Engagement. The Washington Center is an educational organization that brings about 1,500 students from throughout the United States and abroad to Washington for a semester for workforce training, for internships, for academic seminars, and opportunities for civic engagement. So what we want to do is we want to train our students for the workforce of the future, and we also want them to have an academic experience, so their colleges appreciate everything they're learning from experiential education. But this is not only about training people for the workforce. We want them to be responsible citizens. And so we've started what we call comprehensive civic engagement projects, where students get really involved in an issue. This semester we have 5. One is on Israeli-Palestinian peace, torture abolition, global women's rights, dealing with child marriage and female genital mutilation. You can see I like non-controversial topics. Torture abolition, homelessness, and children's health. And so this is our homelessness group, and Jackie has been the leader of this group all semester, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what the students have done. So I want you all to understand that the Washington Center is committed very, very much and takes civic engagement very seriously. It's not just something we put on a piece of paper. It's something that we take very seriously, and you'll see all the work that the students have done this semester to learn about homelessness, and Jackie's going to tell you about that. So this is Jackie Banks, a program advisor, and it's her passion that has kept this project going all semester.
I really won't say too much. I don't love standing in front of an audience, but I just want to say how happy and thrilled that I am that all of you are here today. I'm especially proud of my students, and thank you for showing up. I thought we might have 20 or so people, and I think we might have about 30, and it really just makes me very proud as a program advisor for the Washington Center and also as a social worker. This is an issue deep to my heart, and I thank you very much for participating, and I really hope that you get a lot out of tonight. The students so far have volunteered with So Others Might Eat. They've done a variety of services there, and I think the students at the various tables can tell you more about the work that they've done. And they listen to panels on childhood homelessness, educational homelessness, and panels from people who are homeless or formerly homeless. So they've had an array of experience this semester, and I just want to give you social justice. And I want to give you all a round of applause for being so wonderful. Before I turn it over to Steve, I want to say thank you so much to Steve for hello, people, as you can. I want to thank you so much, Steve, for being a part of our lives here, at the Washington Center. You've brought in a lot of enriched our experiences. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say we have 2 special guests. One is my boss, Kevin Nunley, who is Kevin, Senior Director. And the other is Kevin's boss, who is my boss's boss. And this is Jennifer Clinton over here, who's the Chief Operating Officer. So I just want to say that they've both been extremely, extremely supportive of civic engagement projects. This is something new that the Washington Center is focusing on, and without their support, it would be really, really hard for us to move forward. So let's thank them very much. Okay, so right now we have a student leader, Charles. So Charles has done a lot of things. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself, but he impressed us from the very, very beginning. First, he also coordinated all of the students that we have here. He coordinated the food. He made sure we had enough students who were going to show up. So he's very good at logistical kinds of things. But he's also a leader because he can inspire all of us by telling us a little bit about his story and how he got here tonight.
Can you hear me? Initially, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but Andrea called me last night at 11 p.m. and asked if I would share my story, and I told her that I'd be willing to do that As you guys know, I've been pretty invested in the Poverty and Homelessness Civic Engagement Group here at the Washington Center with the help of Omaris and Chloe. We've set up the student hours and designed and ran the website. But the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because my background is from a very poor family. I grew up not necessarily homeless, but my family was very poor, definitely below the poverty level. So we moved from, Section 8 housing to homeless shelters, and from there, really wherever we could. So I guess why I'm fortunate to be here is because through me dealing with this when I was young, it gave me the opportunity to be here. My mom passed away when I was 15 years old from a drug addiction. At that time, my grandmother took legal custody of me, and she passed away too, so I was considered a dependent, meaning that I didn't have any family members or relatives that could take care of me. So what that means is I was able to get federal grants from the state of Wisconsin to be here tonight. Not only have they allowed me the opportunity to be here, but they've also taken care of my 4 years of college. So it's very unfortunate that I've had to go through this in my life, but it's also something that people should look up to, especially young children. What I urge, especially the students, to do is just to take a look around and see what you can do to get engaged in your community, because even if it doesn't seem like there's anything that you can do, there are a lot of people around that need help, even if it doesn't seem like it. And if you're interested in following me when I go home, feel free to keep in touch, because you guys are great. Thanks.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate seeing you all. My friends that are homeless, my friends that are formerly homeless, and my friends that are service providers in this city. I'm honored to know each and every one of them. This evening is a special evening. I'm blessed to be affiliated with such a wonderful organization as the Washington Center for Internships and Academic Seminars. And so, without further ado, let's kick this program off with our keynote presentation by Mr. Donald Whitehead.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Donald, and Steve asked me to tell you my story. And I know a lot of people think that homeless people just kind of show up at a shelter one day, but our stories are a lot more complicated than that. So. I always tell my story from the beginning. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I grew up in a house that was doubled up, and that means that the house was for one family, but there was more than one family that lived there, and so we had a house with 3 rooms, and so. One room, me and my siblings shared. I had 5 brothers and sisters. There was a room for my mother, but that and father, but that also doubled as the living room. And then there was a kitchen, and that was our house, and it was really small, but it was really happy in the beginning. So we did all the things that normal kids did. We played board games. We watched TV together, and we studied together, because education was very important in our household, and so it was a pretty happy household in the beginning. But then one day my father, he worked the minimum wage job, but because he had to feed a family of 8, he had 2 minimum wage jobs. So he was on his way home from one of his jobs, and he was in a car accident. And the car accident was so bad that his car was wrapped around a tree in a U shape, and he left the accident with 2 scars. There was one scar down the middle of his face, and then there was another scar. That scar was really visible, but then there was another scar that wasn't visible, and that was a scar on his heart. And from that day on, our household changed. It wasn't a happy household anymore. It became a war zone, and my father became an abuser. And so the first person that he saw at night, that's who he beat. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was one of my brothers and sisters, but most of the time it was my mother. And so that went on for a long time, and so it wasn't a happy household then. And so then, so it went on for a while. But my grandfather, he lived under us. He was one of the 3 families, and so he would hear the beatings every day. And so one day he got tired of hearing the beatings, so he confronted my father in the front yard, and they got into a big argument. And then so my grandfather, he shot my father in front of me and my brothers and sisters, and so it wasn't a happy household then. But even though it wasn't a happy household, we were good students. In fact, I was actually a straight-A student. I was a good enough student that I went to a school in my community that was one of the top 10 schools in the entire country. And so when I went to that school, in the beginning I excelled. Academically, I was a straight-A student. Socially, I was on the student council. And athletically, I was on the football team. And things were going okay for me. I was happy then, but after I'd been there for a couple of years, I found out that I suffered from an incurable disease. And so there wasn't a lot of understanding about my disease at that time, so I was asked to leave. And so I left that school, and I went to another school that it was a college prep school. And so that school, again, I excelled academically. I was a straight-A student. Socially, I was on the drama club and the student council. Athletically, I was on the football team and the basketball team, and things were going good for me there. But once again, they found out about my disease, and they asked me to leave. And so I left that school, and I went to another school. It was a community school. It wasn't a special school at all. It was just a regular neighborhood school. And one thing I found out about at that school is that there was a little bit more understanding, because there were other people at that school with my disease. So when I went to that school, I really excelled. Socially, I was the prom king. I was the homecoming king. I was Mr. Senior. Academically, I graduated in the top 10%. Athletically, I was the captain of the football team, and I played basketball. And when I left that school, my classmates voted me most likely to succeed. And so when I left the school, I scored really well on the SATs. So I had my choice of schools to go to. I decided to go to the University of Cincinnati, where I wanted to be a lawyer and a football player. But shortly after I got there, I found out that even though it was a school of higher learning, they didn't understand my disease either. So first I was asked to leave the football team, and then I was asked to leave the University of Cincinnati. And then I was kind of lost. I didn't know what to do. I kind of hung out at my mother's house. But one day while I was hanging out at my mother's house, I saw a commercial that said I could see the world and be all I could be. And so I decided to join the Navy and serve my country. And so I did. And then I went to the Navy. I joined it. I went to a ship that was on a world tour, and they went to Africa, and they went to Asia, and they went to the Middle East, and they went to the Far East. They went to the Philippines and Thailand and Australia. But I wasn't able to see any of those places because shortly after I got to the ship, they labeled me a liberty risk because of my disease. And so I could only leave the boat during daytime hours. And so I always had duty during daytime hours. And finally, when we got back to the United States, once again, I was asked to leave. So I went back to Cincinnati, and I started living what most people consider the American dream. I bought a home in the suburbs. I got married. I went through a series of pretty decent jobs. I was a restaurant manager. I was a car salesman. I was an environmental activist. But one by one, because of my disease, I lost those things. I lost the jobs, I lost the possessions, I lost my house, and I lost my wife, and I became homeless. But when I first became homeless, I wasn't homeless in the traditional sense. I didn't live in a shelter or under a bridge or in an abandoned building or in an abandoned car. I lived doubled up with a friend or on someone's couch, and but the same thing would happen. Someone would give me a chance to stay at their place or in their basement on their couch, and they'd find out about my disease and they'd ask me to leave. And finally, I ran out of places to go, and I did become homeless in a traditional sense. And so the thing I remember most about when I first got out there was that I was always lonely and I was always hungry. I was lonely because I would pass hundreds of people on the street every day, and no one ever took the time to say my name. And so if you don't hear your name for a long time, it's a very lonely feeling. And no one ever took the time to make eye contact. They looked past me, they looked around me. Sometimes it felt like they were looking through me. I felt invisible. I felt like I was no longer part of the human race. And I was always hungry because I didn't know about soup kitchens or shelters or places to get free food. So I did whatever I had to do to survive. Sometimes I panhandled. Sometimes I shoplifted. Sometimes I even had to dumpster dive. I did whatever I had to do to survive. And that went on for a long time, but then it started to get cold, and it was really cold one day, and it was also wet, and that's the worst time for homeless people, when you're cold and you're wet because you can't get dry. So I remember seeing on TV that people sometimes hung out at the bus station, so I went to the bus station, and I ran into some homeless guys, and they told me some really good information. Homeless people are pretty caring people, so they told me where I could find a place to sleep and a roof over my head and something to eat. So I went to a place called the Drop-In Center in Cincinnati. The Drop-In Center was a room like this with 170 mats about 6 inches away from each other. And you're in a shelter, you want to look kind of tough, and so I always slept in the back because I didn't look so tough. Because most nights I cried myself to sleep because after all I was most likely to succeed. And I had succeeded in ending up in a homeless shelter. And then I get up in the morning and I go to work. I went to work every day. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, went to a temporary service. I waited till 7. They gave me a job, which I had to travel an hour and a half to get to. I worked for 9 hours because they didn't pay me for lunch. We traveled an hour and a half back, and then I waited an hour to get my check. And at the end of the day, I usually had about $20. I worked every day, but I never made enough money to find a place to live. And the worst thing about it wasn't that the pay was so low and I couldn't find a place to live. The worst thing was that they never took the time to know my name. Even if you're homeless, they take out taxes. They make you pay for safety equipment. They make you pay for travel, all kinds of things. So that went on for a long time. Then one day I was at the shelter and this guy walked up to me with these funny horn rim glasses on, and he started talking. And the first thing I realized is that he was looking me in the eye. And he asked me my name in the beginning, and he said my name about 3 times during the conversation. And that really had an effect on me. And at the end of the conversation, I didn't remember everything he said, but I remember these 4 words. He said, "I'm glad you're here." And so that really touched me. And so he also told me that although my disease is progressive, it's incurable, and it's fatal if not arrested, there is treatment for my disease. So he told me that there was treatment right there. My disease is the disease of addiction. And there was treatment right there at that place called the Drop-In Center. It was a 6-month treatment program. One of the components of the program was community service. And I started doing my community service with a place called the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless. I need to pause for a second, though. Sorry, I'm more. You guys want? I'm going to take my coat off. You guys want? So I started doing my community service with the Greater Cincinnati Coalition, and so I worked as a volunteer for the coalition for about 6 months, and then after 6 months they hired me as an outreach worker. And as an outreach worker, I created a street newspaper called S.T.E.V.E. I created a television show about homeless people called S.T.E.V.E. I created a radio show about homeless people called Street Vibes. And I created a band for homeless people. You probably can't guess the band's name. They weren't very creative with names. So I did that. I'm sorry, I'm still warm. I have on layers though. So I start working for after 6 months. I worked as the volunteer. They hired me. Began as the outreach worker, and I did that for 2 years. And then after 2 years as the outreach worker, they hired me as the first formerly homeless African-American director of the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless. And so I looked around as the director at these programs in Cincinnati for homeless people. One thing I realized is that there were all these programs for homeless people, but there were no homeless people involved in the planning process. So I created something called the Homeless Think Tank. And it became a model for the city of Cincinnati, and they adopted the Homeless Think Tank. So if you had a program that you wanted to start for homeless people in Cincinnati, you had to use the Homeless Think Tank. And that model actually started my advocacy role, and so that advocacy got recognized on the state level, and I became a board member for the state coalition on housing and homelessness in Ohio. And after doing that for a while, I got a little recognition for advocacy on a national level, and I became a board member for the National Coalition for the Homeless. After 2 years on that board, I became the first formerly homeless board president for the National Coalition for the Homeless. And then 2 years later, I was hired as the first formerly homeless executive director of the National Coalition for the Homeless. So let me tell you about some really wonderful things that happened to me as the executive director of the National Coalition for the Homeless. I had the opportunity to have dinner at the home of President Bill and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I was able to testify before the United States Congress in both written and verbal testimony on several occasions. I was able to help write legislation that, if enacted, would have ended homelessness in this country. We were able as a coalition to pass legislation to make sure that every school district in this country has a liaison for homeless children. I'm really proud of that opportunity. I was able to help plan the anniversary of the 40-year March on Washington, where I got to hang out with some of the great civil rights leaders of our time, Martin Luther King III, Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, and I could go on and on. I got to speak at the anniversary of the 40-year March on Washington. I got to sit on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with Coretta Scott King in one of her last public appearances before she died. I was able to do some things creatively that I've always wanted to do. As you see, you probably can tell that I like to act. So I have been able to act. I've been able to produce. I've produced music. I've been able to write 3 plays. I've been able to do technical difficulties. I finished my first novel. It's called Most Unlikely to Succeed. Shameless self-promotion, Amazon.com. I've also been able to act in 3 movies, 3 independent movies, and in 2000, for an independent movie called Hope in the Sky, I received an Emmy Award. Wow. Again, I tell my story that way because I want people to understand in this room that homelessness is not a permanent condition. It's a situation. It is not a moral situation. It's an economic situation. And people who are homeless do not remain homeless. Some of us go on to do some really good things. And if you don't remember anything I said tonight, remember this quote by the great Booker T. Washington. He said, "Success should not be judged by one's station in life, but the obstacles they've had to overcome to get there." And please, if you're homeless in this room, please remember that this situation is not your destiny. And you can go on to do whatever you want to do in this world. God has been really special to me and allowed me to do some wonderful things in my life, and I'm just truly grateful for all those individuals who are willing to give of themselves and do the things in community service that help me become the person that I've become today. And I'm not a good person because I have an Emmy or wrote a book or wrote a play. I'm a good person because I'm able every day of my life to freely give back what was given to me. And I think if we can do that in our lives, if we can make that our purpose, we're truly doing what we were brought here to do. And a couple of other things. I know a lot of you do community service. You've talked about the community service you've done here through the Washington Center. Many times you do that community service and you don't get to see the tangible results of community service. Well, tonight you have a room full of the tangible results of community service. So I thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And if no one's told you today, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much.
We have a short poem by James Davis, Arugula.
Good evening. I want to thank you all for having me come here this afternoon to be involved with this great program and support Steve and his organization. This poem is entitled Arugula Salad Remix. Arugula Salad Remix. If you could think back to the time when then Senator Obama was doing his campaign and he went to a Whole Foods market in Denver and he was looking at the arugula, and a lot of comments were made in the media about him talking about the price of arugula salad. So here we go. Give me your filthy rich, your Wall Street brokers, your CEOs, your billionaires and millionaires, your Ponzi schemers, your jet setters and your high rollers, as they sit in the parlor of their Fifth Avenue apartments asking the butler, what wine shall we have with our arugula salad this evening? Give me your average Joes, your middle income earners, your white collar execs, your entrepreneurs, your blue collar workers, your tea partiers, your businessmen, your small business owners as they contemplate the rising costs of arugula. Give me your homeless, your dirt poor, your hobos, your slum dwellers, your welfare recipients, your minimum wage earners, your day laborers, your working poor and your unemployed and jobless, as they stand in the unemployment line asking, what the hell is arugula? Thank you.
Steve told us at the last minute, I didn't hear about the poet, but that was wonderful. He told me, trust him. You got a lot, right? Yes, you did? Yeah. Okay, so now we're ready to start our dialogue, everybody, and this is going to go on for 50 minutes. We started a little late, till 9 o'clock. This is the way we'd like to proceed. We have experts, policy experts on the various issues, and we have students who chose that particular issue to focus on. So there are facilitators who have some guidelines, and what we'd like to do is we want to maximize the interaction between the students and the policy experts. So policy experts don't just talk to each other, talk to the students so they can hear what's going on and they can get involved in the discussion. So we kind of want to leave this up to you. You have 3 different guidelines. The first are some questions that we want you to pose to the students. I guess you've all been kind of sitting together, so you don't have to go through introductions. I'm assuming everybody already did that. If not, please go through your introductions, introduce yourself. And we want the students to share a little bit about what they've done this semester, what they've learned about homelessness. Jackie forgot to say that she made everyone do a social justice reflection. So it's not only that they were believing in social justice, they had to write a social justice reflection. And they were really, really good. And so we want them to be informed advocates. We don't want people to just kind of say, well, yes, I care about the homeless. Well, what did you learn? And they're not very well informed. We want them to be informed about the issues. That's really, really important to us. And that's what the social justice reflections did. So we'd like the facilitators to begin with asking the students some of the questions posed there. And then there's another series of questions for people who are homeless or formerly homeless. And then the third part of the policy-related questions. Steve designed all these questions. Thank you, Steve. That's what we'd like you to do. And so at 9 o'clock, so please try to cover all of them and get a great facilitator is somebody who can get everybody to interact. Okay? So everybody can begin your dialogue now. Facilitators, there you go. What we'd like is a student from each table to get up for 2 minutes, and only 2 minutes because we have 10 tables, and to talk a little bit about the most memorable aspects of the dialogue. So we don't want a summary, because then it'll kind of get boring. We want the most memorable moments from the dialogue that happened at your particular table.
I've had the honor of sitting here this evening with these fine gentlemen, learning a lot of things I didn't know, and I guess discussing some things I did and gathering different opinions and whatnot. I was at the mental health and substance abuse table. We had a little bit of an interesting conversation. We talked a little bit about politics, a little bit about everyone's different opinion on their time when they were homeless. Our discussion that just ended was we were discussing whether or not veterans should, I guess, get more or less preferential treatment for homeless services or public services, and the consensus was that I suppose they should, because if they were honorable enough to serve the country, they should get something back out of it. Another one was, let's see, whether or not the classic top 1%, if they should be paying more taxes, and that's something I kind of get a little too fired up about, because I don't think that the distribution of wealth is very efficient in this country. So we went back and forth on that, and basically all agreed that we're kind of beat right now because the politics isn't looking very good with all of our wonderful candidates we have right now. But
Our table was employment and living wage, and I also got a chance to sit with 3 lovely gentlemen and Marie as well. And one of the things that impacted me was Rodney, one of the men that was sitting with us. He made an amazing point that he said, if we start from the bottom, if we teach our children to have respect for homeless people, to learn about it, to also know that what they see in television is not true, that everything isn't, glitz glamour and like watches and everything's not superficial. Like, you have to work hard, and education is definitely a foundation to help you one day fight homelessness, or fight away from drug abuse or substance abuse. And also he made an amazing point to students that graduate high school before they go to college, to do some form of community service so that they have a better connection with the community, and also sense or have better connections. So I thought that was a great point.
I was on a table of street homelessness, and what touched me the most is that we're here together, like people who were homeless once and people who are not homeless. And the point of the discussion that interested me most was like the fact that, what do you do as you pass the street when you pass somebody who's homeless? What do you do? Because you can, how can you help because you pass by and you don't know, you want to help them, but what do you do? And then they say, like, you can just talk to the people, watch them, look them in the eye, and just treat them like human beings. And I think that's something really important because I think a lot of people want to help, but they don't know really how to do it. So that was very interesting. What also is very interesting that I'm from Europe, and we have a totally different system. We have our social security net is like way bigger, and I saw like they were so surprised about how much people, if they lose their jobs, how much they get in our country, and that was also very interesting. Well, we get like something, our minimum wage is something like $14, I think $1,100, if that's like a month. That's our minimum wage. So if you tell them that, it's like something like cultural shock.
I'm still in shock.
You're still in shock? You're okay.
And for as long as you're there, for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's indefinite, yeah. It's, yeah. So it's really something that's very interesting.
Money is not the issue. Money is not the issue. It's not.
Do you think that's something that that this country, that this government is capable of achieving?
Well, Carlton said it. You know, it's a money thing, and so money is not the issue. Money is not the problem. Money is the issue. Okay. The issue is that you got people who are in it for it's a business, for profit. It's for profit. You know.
But America is a profit-driven.
It's a we're capital-driven country. So you have homeless providers who are living like chic executives.
Yeah.
We had a lovely table. Had the honor of sitting next to Mr. Lafayette, Ms. Retina, and of course, senior recruit Whitehead. Mr. Donald Whitehead. It was truly a pleasure to meet everybody. We began by sharing our stories, which was interesting because we didn't really prepare any of us, but it turned out to be, I noticed, to be a beautiful thing because it truly started coming out of the heart and why everybody was part of this particular civic engagement.
We orchestrated just to start like a food drive for that day. We had about 150 students joined us, and we try to make it competition because that's like get the energy going. So we're like, make it a day on, not a day off. And then we got T-shirts, and we're like, we're gonna raise 25,000 for just one day of service. And then we had 9 different teams. We said the team that would raise the most amount of food would get a very good prize. And so we sent them all out in the community. And it was tight, like during that day in the morning, like, people going out, like my friend and I, we were driving from store to store, and it seemed like, the giving wasn't that great, but then we, try to like cheer them on.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivory, and I'm from Central Asia. Today I was at the table right behind, and we were talking about youth and foster care, and although we don't have a representative of the people, like children who are in such position, I would say it's also very important for me personally and for everyone else, just because that's children, they are the future of this country. And we covered, as part of our conversation, the reasons for the people who are in this situation, reasons for the homelessness, and while we were talking, we were just crushing all the stereotypes that might be in the society. And I want to share with you the story which impressed me as well. Mr. Eric, he shared it with me, and Asel and Megan. So there was a lady, a friend of him, and at the age of 6, her mother became homeless.
Denise is now 27 years old. When she was 6 back in 1990, so when she was 6 back in 1990, her mother became homeless. And So, because her mother was homeless, Denise got taken away from her mother and put into foster care. And Denise aged out of foster care at 21 years old back in 2005. And at that time, she had a girl. Her girl was now 7 years old. So when her girl was 1 year old, Denise became homeless, and then her daughter got taken away from her. So Denise was taken from her mother when her mother became homeless, and now Denise's daughter was taken away from her.
I think the chance that I get to know this person, because he's living in a shelter, and I would never ever guess that he's doing so, because he's really smart and he's and he's too much he's so educated.
Oh, Aaron!
Thank you. Hi everyone, I am Josie, I'm from Brazil. I was in this table of homeless policy, and it was such a pleasure talking with these people. It just happened that we had an international table because I'm from Brazil, and there were two girls from South Korea and China. So we were talking a bit about our different backgrounds, and we were sharing our stories and how the homelessness situation happens in our own countries and how it affects all of us, and of course we try to see what are the solutions we can have for the homelessness. So is it their problem or our problem, the homelessness? Which means, okay, it's both problems. That's the conclusion we come to. And then we were trying to discuss what were the causes of the homelessness and how it affects all of us. And of course, we tried to see what are the solutions we can have for the homelessness.
I was at the table when domestic violence with Penny, Ashley, Claudette, and Carolyn, and what we talked about was the fact that the face of homelessness is really changing. I think a lot of the stereotypical images that many people have is that it's single, it's men. And that's not really the case anymore. There's a lot of women who are in abusive relationships who need to get out, and there's women with children who are left homeless because they leave these relationships and they can't find help or can't get into shelters, or they don't want to be separated from their kids because the shelter doesn't allow them to stay together. And one of the things we talked about was that there's not enough programs to help these women. A lot of them are long-term. They can't get help immediately, so some are forced to stay in these relationships or return to their abusers because they have nowhere to live. And especially older women who are in abusive relationships, that some of these programs are offered to women, but women with children. And the older women aren't allowed into these programs, and they're left with a lot fewer opportunities to get help. And that was something I didn't really know much about, and it's something that's very important. Last thing I wanted to say was one of the terms that they used was a poverty pimp, which I had no idea what that was. But I guess it's people that use these programs that are on the outside make it seem like they're there to help people, but they're basically force people to stay within the system, because otherwise these people wouldn't be able to make money and pay their own bills. So they force people down and keep them in these systems, and I think that's something that really needs to be addressed.
I was at the table of affordable housing, and I really enjoyed my discussion with Adam, who worked on the Hill for how many years? 5 on the Hill, and he implemented many policies that helped homeless individuals better themselves and better their lives. a personal story that he shared that I really enjoyed and connected with was his mother passed away when he was 13. Here in DC, he's a DC native, and he was able to go into the room where his mother passed away years later, where it was turned into a homeless shelter. And I thought, hearing that, it just really hit home, and it made me realize that there's still people doing good things here in DC. Some of the more tough issues we touched on were Section 8 housing and whether or not funding should be available for Section 8 housing and who should provide the funding, which tax bracket should the funding come from. We agreed that there was not enough funding, or we should look at reallocating the funding to our homeless communities. We all agreed that there's not enough being done for the homeless community, especially in DC. It's absolutely not acceptable to see someone sleeping on the street when there's so many resources available. We all agreed that more needs to be done to show the homeless community that there are resources available.
My name is Pablo. I'm part of the shelter homelessness. We really had a great conversation. Believe me when I tell you that I had not paid that much attention to anything pretty much until I was cartoons as a little kid.
By giving back, not only I'm helping others, I feel like at the end of the day I'm going to feel better about myself and about what I've done. Obviously, just overall, I'll feel better personally. So I would say those are my interests. As a person, I want to keep moving forward. I want to advance, and giving back and helping out people is something that's my agenda.
The two things that really caught my attention the most out of our conversation, first is the personal touch. You know, our main speaker of the night here was triggered by 4 words. Do you remember them?
I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad you're here. So remember, we're just people. Every single one of them in here is just a person, and no matter what you're going through, even if you're going through the worst stuff that can possibly happen to you, you're just a person. Treat people like persons. Look at just this fine case. Someone just looked at him in the eye, told him his name, said, I'm glad you're here. Look what he was able to do and achieve. So whenever you face a homeless person in the street or anywhere, I know it's hard to help, but just, you know, keep your feet on the ground and understand that we're all people, and treat them as they deserve, just as people in individual portions. And second was just as simple as don't take anything for granted, you know. Alan was pointing out, when I had a great family, I took that for granted. When I had a hot shower, I took that for granted. So every day in the morning, please just, I think I'm going to start applying that to myself a lot. Just, you know, just understand that what you have is really valuable, and like I said, don't take it for granted. Just really love what you have, love your family. If you believe in religion and God, do love that, absolutely.
Well, first I'd like to thank the lovely Miss Walda, Mr. Robert, and Mr. James for joining us tonight. You guys have been amazing. And I'd like to start with the fact that I once heard a quote, and it said, I don't just want to exist, I want to live. Oh guys, truth is that homeless individuals do exist, but they do not live. Civil rights are often split from human rights, and by that I mean that the money is diverted to corporations, and homelessness has never been a priority in this country. It is a human right that everyone is entitled to a shelter, but not a civil right. Some cities even provide a one-way ticket out of their cities in selfish hopes to promote tourism. Truth is, there is no one-way ticket out of homelessness. This is not something to be ignored and pushed away and kicked out. This is something to be seen. Sometimes working your hardest is not enough, and that's how one becomes homeless. They try, and you know what? You never know when your turn's gonna come. Life is very unexpected events. And the addictions that derive from one not having a home permanently scar individuals. leaving them with no hope of even ever getting a decent paying job because of those addictions and criminal records and whatnot. So this automatically eliminates their chance to be just like the majority of us who are students right now. Lastly, I want to say that when doors continues to shut and there's no one to turn to, I ask that all of you, every single person in this room, turns towards homeless people rather than away from them. And please remember and keep in the front of your mind that houseless people are just like us. We are all one human nature under God, indivisible, with justice for all.